We're very happy that you've chosen to join us either live today or on our YouTube channel when viewing the recording. We have an exceptional opportunity today because we have a speaker who is going to tell us things that we all need to know: how to deal with stress, how to deal with burnout, how to release our potential, how to find out how we're supposed to live our lives and how to get there, and lots of things that women think about. Our speaker is Jessica Bowser. She comes to us through our friend, Dr. Emily Schum. And Jessica herself is also a clinical psychologist, but she has used her training to move into areas where women really live, how to keep themselves healthy and strong and develop a positive mindset and learn how to take care of themselves and get rid of old ideas that are holding them back. So we are extremely happy to have Jessica with us today. And I'm going to stop talking and introduce her and let her tell us all about it. We are so happy to have Jessica Bowser.
For the introduction, Barbara, and thank you, Women on the Move Network, for inviting me to speak on a topic that I'm very passionate about. And I will explain why I'm passionate about it in a second. Also, hi, Nanette. Nanette's not new to me and my content, so very exciting to see you here. So just to explain a little bit about me before I go into the presentation, the reason why I share a little bit about myself and my story is, to a certain extent, I believe either people will be able to resonate with it and identify themselves in it, or they'll be able to understand, empathize, or they know someone who's also been through something similar, and then to also understand why I got into the work that I got into. So first things first, my name is Jessica Bowser. I am a biracial female. I am Black and white, French Canadian, and African American. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland on the East Coast, currently on the West Coast in California. When I was growing up, I grew up in a area where having a white mother was not typical. And so experiencing some discrimination, either covertly or overtly. That was when I was very little. Thankfully, my parents recognizing that, we moved to a more diverse area, but it doesn't mean that some of that didn't come with me as I grew up. And so again, I'll get into that into the presentation. During this time, I was above average academically. My father was a teacher. My mother, after being a stay-at-home mom, went to work in the school system. So academics was very important. And again, this started to shape my beliefs about what success meant, what being smart and intelligent meant, and all the things. And so when we talk about beliefs, we start to see and understand ourselves and how we view ourselves, others, and the world based on those beliefs and the belief system. Okay, so all that sounds great. I was gifted, I was in all the classes, and I did well academically, and things went well. I went to college, I went to graduate school, but that is where the story starts to shift. So although my grades were doing well and on paper and from the outside, everything seemed to be going well, I was suffering. I was suffering mentally with anxiety and depression, and I was suffering physically with my physical health. So my early 20s and mid 20s, I was always sick. I didn't know what was going on. I would go to doctors, would not get any answers. And I was just trying to make it through a graduate program. Even though I had all A's, I was suffering. During that time, I found fitness. And so that is how I started to bring myself out of my depression and deal with my anxiety, which was at the time through running and through boxing. So I started boxing at 23 years old. not the typical story. But again, being able to start to use the my physical health to also help my mental health. And so making sure that I was taking care of myself. So as we talk, I want you to always think about this holistic approach to everything. So we can't just take care of a person in this one area. We should look at all of the areas and utilize everything that we can and all the resources that we can to help the individual. Okay. So after I graduated from Pepperdine University with my degree, I called home to my parents, said, congratulations, guys, you did it. You raised a child who got the degree. Unfortunately, this isn't what I want to do. I actually want to become a personal trainer. So from that point, I started working in gyms, helping people with their physical health. So taking a break from the mental health aspect of things as a therapist, because I was getting burnt out. I was stressed and I had seen how I was suffering. So I thought the solution would be change career track, change focus. However, during that time, I got caught up in the corporate ladder. I started getting promoted. I started moving up. And I, again, to the world standards and to external standards, I was successful. I got married, I had a baby, I was getting promoted, things were going great, except internally, I was suffering. I had a 2-year-old, and at that time I was driving over 300 miles a week. Some nights I wouldn't see him and I would have to see him the next morning before I rushed back off to work. On the weekends, I was so drained, so tired, I didn't want to do anything. And so the stress had began to really get to me. Thankfully, I felt I have a supportive partner and I felt like, you know what, I'm meant for more and I don't have to be here. I don't have to do this. And although I felt stuck, I knew I was not stuck. And so at that time, I started transitioning into starting my own business. I never thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but here I was feeling like this is the solution to all of my problems. So I left my job, started a health and fitness business, and I was struggling. And so I finally hit a point where I said, okay, at some point, it can't be everything else. It can't be all the external things all of the time. What is going on? And at that time, I started taking my personal development and personal growth very seriously. That is when I started to identify things called limiting beliefs that were holding me back, but also created the environment and the container that I found myself suffering through. So now we'll get into the presentation and I will explain what beliefs are and all of the things that you all are probably wondering, what is going on with this girl? So I'm going to share my screen. Are we able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so we're going to cover, where do we begin knowing all of this? What are beliefs and what are limiting beliefs? Where and when do these beliefs develop? Why are beliefs important to identify and analyze? How do your beliefs impact you? And what can you do to challenge your beliefs? So first, I want everyone to just sit and think, who and what do you want to become? Okay, what do you want to do in life? How do you want your life to look? What do you want to accomplish? What legacy do you want to leave behind? Who do you want to be known as? And what do you want to be known for? These are all questions that we have given time to think about at one point or another in our lives. These are what we call goals. When we start to think about our goals and things that we want to accomplish, this is what we're thinking of. That is all future focused. And that's great, except there are also a set of questions that we have to think about. What are you doing now? How does life look right now, today? What goals do you have written down or are you working towards right now? How do you think of your day when you lay down to go to sleep? Who are you today? And what are you known for? And what is the relationship between these questions? this is where we are, we're at point A, but we want to get to point B. How do we get there? How do we think that we get from point A to point B? And people can share in the chat, or a pretty intimate group, so if people want to unmute and share, they can. But what do we think that it will take for us to get to point B, whatever point B is for us?
Self-determination.
Determination. What else?
Willpower.
Willpower. Great. What else?
Well, I think we have to recognize that many of the answers to the A column have to do with expectations that were built into us by our parents and family and other people.
Mm-hmm.
And we probably have to look at that and say, are those pressures or those expectations, are they still valid? And do I still have to do that because so-and-so told me that I should?
Mm-hmm. So we're even starting to introduce, right, this idea of beliefs. And so exactly. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I also think a connection with a faith.
Mm-hmm.
With me to, the realization that, we're not just physical beings. Our true nature is spiritual.
Absolutely. I
So
100% agree. But I feel like we get caught up, right? Sometimes we get caught up in what's happening.
oh yeah.
And what Barbara was introducing and alluding to was this idea, right, that sometimes what we think we want, or the future, what we have an idea for the future, actually isn't maybe how we feel, but there's some expectation there, which again, we'll get to a little bit later, but it all comes down to what we believe, right? We all can dream. We can all think about all the things that we want to do, be, have, or whatever. But if we're not doing that now, that just feels like just that, a dream.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no real steps to get there. So, introducing, this is the logical levels of change, okay? So this is Dilt's neuro-linguistic programming, logical levels of change. The reason that I introduced this is because it's a framework that I operate on when I work with my one-on-one clients, as well as when I go into companies and present this, because there's a certain way that people think that things go and how things have to go in order to get from point A to point B. So this model shows the levels in which we operate. It is a hierarchical pyramid where the lower levels may affect the upper levels, okay? So lower levels: environment, behavior, skills and capabilities, beliefs and values, and our identity at the very top. And so we think, let's change our environment, let's change our behaviors. Maybe I need to gain some more skills. I need to learn some new things. That's where I'll focus my efforts, and then life will change for me. However, if we were to flip this pyramid upside down and focus our identity and our beliefs and values, they will change our environment, our behavior, and our skills and capabilities. And just as an example, because I come from the fitness world originally, this is the best example that I think a lot of people can relate to. It's January 1st and we're creating resolutions. We want to eat better. We want to exercise more. We want to lose weight. We want to get toned. We want to get strong. We want to get fit. We want to pick up some new habits. So what do? We clean the pantry. We join a gym, right? So that's our environment. We're changing our environment. Behaviors. Maybe we go to the grocery store and we pick out the healthy foods. We go for a walk, or we go for a run, or we do our first workout. Skills and capabilities, we look at YouTube videos on how to meal prep, how to meal plan. Maybe we buy a few resources to help us do that. But if our beliefs and our values don't change, our identity doesn't change, we don't feel like the person that goes to the gym. We don't feel like the healthy person. We don't feel like the person who chooses a salad when they goes to the restaurant instead of the loaded baked potato, right? If we don't feel that that is who we are, we can attempt to change behaviors, but we will be relying on willpower, or, right, the muscle of willpower or motivation. And oftentimes what we see happen is that we don't stick with those changes lifelong. Lifelong changes happen when we start to embody and become that person. Because now the behaviors are easy. Because, well, in this situation, if I want to be a marathon runner, well, what would a marathon runner do? A marathon runner would go run today. A marathon runner would get a coach. A marathon runner would get some new shoes. Those are easy behaviors to choose because I now embody that identity. Does this make sense for everyone? Does anyone have any questions about this so far? Let me pull up the chat just in case.
Makes perfect sense.
Good. If any questions come up, by the way, feel free to ask, okay? But again, what we want to do is to really look at who we believe that we are and our beliefs around who we are, how others operate, and the world around us. And values go into that, because if I value my health, right? Some people, they say, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. That's not a value, that's just something you want to accomplish. But if I value my health and I believe that I am a healthy person, that's when my environment, my behaviors, and my capabilities will begin to match. So what I end up doing with my clients is working this pyramid from both angles. So yes, let's start to shift your environment to match, because what we see, right, what our environment is, we start to embody, but also let's really start believing that's who we are right now. You're not a marathon runner until you run the marathon, but we still have to train to be a marathon runner. So let's start embodying being that marathon runner right now. And so again, I'm just using this as an example because I think, well, marathon might be an extreme for most people, but we all have known, right, what it feels like to, okay, I could do better with my health. I could do better with nutritious eating or with exercising or moving more. And so just using that as an example, but this can literally be applied to any and everything. If it's career, it could be embodying, you could be entry level, bottom of the totem pole at this company, but you want to become the, an executive, the CEO. Okay, but you need to begin to feel and operate as the CEO right now. Okay. But what are beliefs and what are limiting beliefs? Beliefs are mental representations of the ways our brains expect things in our environment to behave and how things should be related to each other. As I read and as you see this definition, what stands out to you the most?
Like Barbara was talking about, those expectations.
Right. So we believe that our beliefs are just the truth. But that's because that's how we've been conditioned. That does not mean it is the truth. That is just our truth because that's how we've been conditioned. So therefore, we start to create expectations or how things should be related or how things should go And we operate in that as the truth. Which is why in the world, a lot of things are challenging because people have different beliefs, but everyone's operating in their belief as their truth. Okay. So beliefs are thoughts that we have been conditioned to think repeatedly. They become our automatic thoughts. Thoughts we don't have to think about. They're just so automatic. And beliefs shape our reality, not necessarily the reality. Originally, or evolutionarily speaking, beliefs were crucial to survival, and so they still feel that way today. And they shape the way that we see the world, others, and ourselves. I usually when I have more people, I do this exercise. It's been very interesting, but so I'll just say what I usually do. What I do at this point in the presentation often is I pause as if I'm getting a phone call. And I pick up the phone and I say, oh, hey girl, how are things going? Yeah, okay, well, I'm in the middle of a presentation, but I would love to catch up. So I'm gonna call you right after this. Tell mom I said hi. And everyone's mortified because they're like, what? She picked up the phone in the middle of a presentation? And then my question would be, why is that mortifying? Why does that make us feel negatively? How would it change if I picked up the phone and said, hello? Oh my goodness, are you okay? Oh my gosh, I will get help right away. Those same thoughts and feelings that the participants have for the first conversation are typically not the same ones that they have with the second conversation. Although the scenario was the same, I picked up the phone in the middle of a presentation. But we proceed with empathy, we proceed with worry, we proceed with, oh my goodness, I hope that everything is okay. If she has to go, we understand, versus the first situation. But what changed? And it tends to be our beliefs or what we were primed or conditioned to think about when someone gives a presentation, how people should operate, what is professional. Those are all beliefs. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about that? I did that in workshops with some groups at Apple. Okay, they were mortified, but it drove the point home because this is a concept of what is professional. Where did we get that idea from? It's not about right or wrong. It's questioning, where did I get these ideas from? Who told me that this is what should be expected?
That reminds.
I love that, Jessica, because who wrote the rule on how to be human? I mean, it's not about who wrote the rule on how to be kind, but I mean, you don't walk up to somebody's face 3 inches away and start hollering at them. But why can't you just be human and stop every now and again? Yeah. Just yesterday, this mom, I only go out every now and again, but this mom was berating her little girl because she wanted to move a snail, right? And 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 I didn't. I kind of saw it out of the corner of my eye, but I saw the snail too, and it broke my heart because I thought it was going to get squished. So you know me, I'm a little weirdo, so I stopped and I picked up the snail and I walked it to the bush and I looked up and I said, "Did you see that snail too? I want to save him too because it made me sad. He might break his house." I know I made that little girl's day, but I didn't have to follow with, "Mom, how could you be so mean?" Or I didn't have to berate the mom, but I just, and it's just stopping. It was a 3 second, like maybe a 15-second thing. But why can't we just be human? It's good. I love that. Thank you. I interrupted. I'm sorry, but
No, it's okay. It's a discussion.
yeah, it's good to be human. Why do we have all these rules?
Well,
love
we're
it.
going to
I
get
love
into why we have all these rules.
Yeah, okay. There we go. Love it. Love it.
And there's another belief that if you get emotional over something and tears come to your eyes, you're weak.
Mhm.
And that I am one of those people that when things touch my heart, my heart leaks through my eyes.
Yeah.
And I was, always embarrassed and people would, stop that, that's, da, 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 da. Finally, I got to the point where I said, no, this is, and it was an example of a beautiful woman. She is a storyteller. Her name is Blanche. And she said that, she said, if I, when things touch my heart, it leaks through my eyes. She said, so if I get teary eyed, that's, just what's happening. So that's what I've done. And I'm just, so what if I get teary eyed, it's, it's touching me.
Mhm. Was there ever a point where you weren't okay or felt either insecure or whatever about?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because of people's comments. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's starting the belief, right?
Yeah.
And you challenged it, right? Or someone helped you challenge that.
Someone
thought.
helped me challenge it. So yeah.
And that's exactly what happens, right? So either people tell us something outwardly, like they literally will say it, or it's not something that's said, but it's kind of implied, or that's what we feel, or that is a meaning that we assign to it. And that constructs our beliefs. So even if it was never a situation where someone said anything about you tearing up or feeling, if I express emotion, it makes me weak. Let's say that you started crying and people were like, right? No one said anything. No one told you that that's something you should believe, but you could still create the same representation of, oh, it's not okay for me to be emotional. It's not okay for me to cry. It's not okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so when we start getting into that, these can also become limiting beliefs. So limiting beliefs are when these mental representations restrict us from engaging in certain behaviors, thereby stunting or impeding our progress or success. So depending on how you ask, emotions can be a very positive thing because they are information and they also help us empathize. But if we continued believing that showing our emotion, showing how we truly feel about things is a hindrance or it's not a good thing to do, that could impede us from becoming a leader, from being able to connect with certain people, because right, there are people that are emotional or show their emotion, are okay with showing emotion. And if they have someone who's supposed to be inspiring, who's supposed to be a leader, who's supposed to be, someone that they connect with, that could be a barrier. Right. So emotions, beliefs, thoughts inherently are not bad. It is only when we start to attribute them and they hold us back.
This makes me think of a few years back when women first started breaking through the glass ceiling. Mm-hmm. And most women thought they had to show up in a gray suit with a white blouse and some kind of a scarf at their neck. And they couldn't possibly show any emotion about anything. And that was the way to survive in that environment. And many women found that their joy at breaking through the ceiling suddenly became very restrictive and very stressful. Mm-hmm. Because of these expectations as to what a woman executive ought to look like and act like. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness we don't have that very much anymore. Mm-hmm. But a number of women went through some very hard times. And it also created unrealistic expectations and unrealistic standards on the part of men. Mm-hmm. Through really no fault of their own. That's just the way it shook out. So I can see that we need to we need to find the middle ground between being restricted by these outside forces and still holding to certain standards of courtesy and appropriate behavior in given situations.
And to your point, talking about women, breaking into corporate as an example, but it still goes on in certain industries more so than others, and it happens with race, it happens with culture, and so the good thing about being able to have discussions about it is to bring it to light, and then also be able to help everyone empathize, because whether you're a woman, or whether you are a minority male or whatever, we should all be able to empathize with, we've had thoughts about things or beliefs about things and how things should operate that don't align with our values, and they don't align with our identity, and that's where a struggle starts, right? And so, as you said, feeling that stress, because when your values, so beliefs and values were the same part of the pyramid, when we're out of alignment with our values, that's when a lot of things start to come up. And so I can speak from working in a male-dominated industry, although I joke and say, I'm from the East Coast, so I kind of have a little bit more masculine energy when it comes to certain things. This was still a limiting belief I can look back on now, but I still felt like, okay, I'm the underdog in so many ways. I was a female in male-dominated industry. I was not an exercise science major. I actually came from, with pseudoscience, depending on who you're talking to, right? Psychology. I wasn't an athlete my whole life, and so all of these things, which I felt like maybe other people saw, were really my own limiting beliefs. And we'll talk about the impacts in a second, but the impacts of these limiting beliefs and why it's so harmful to us to hold on to those.
Jessica, before you move on, I just want to touch upon that very sensitive point. One industry that is still very much dominated by the emotions, not the number of gender, women are taken over in the field of law and the courtrooms, and, having many bench officers being female, but it's still, I remember I've practiced about 3 decades, and it's just now creating a different culture and a different system of belief that is not imposed on us through the environment, but we're creating that environment or recreating that environment. The fact that women had to hide their emotions in presentations in front of the jurors or in front of the judges, because if they were too emotional, it was perceived as being drama queens, and you're not allowed. They were shut down. You were not allowed to really use emotions of people to make your point. And then if you were too aggressive, you were trying to be someone else. Well, men are supposed to be aggressive, and it comes across very naturally. But if you're being aggressive, or you're wearing a gray suit, as Barbara was saying, it was just the expectations of others that was really stunting and, as you said, impeding our progress, because we just had to always act according to the expectations of others, even though I didn't believe it. The very first day I walked in a courtroom, I had a bright pink, fuchsia suit. And for years, I was just outside the norm, perceived as, oh, you're trying to use your femininity to take advantage, or try to use your looks to take advantage. So no matter what we did, we were just being, stunted, as you said, or impeded by other beliefs and expectations. And I really think that we are changing the nature around us, and the fact that we need to change our beliefs and change the environment at the same time is very important for me. I can't think of them not being interconnected and so intertwined.
Mm-hmm. And I always think, so in my corporate workshops, when I do this, there's a video that I show again, that we'll talk about with the impacts, but this idea of conforming, right? And so the impact of some of our beliefs make us conform, make us want to fit in, right? And biologically, that and evolutionarily, that makes sense. We don't want to be the outsider. We don't want to be the outcast. We don't want to be rejected. But part of that also, again, not aligning with our values if it doesn't feel authentic to us, right? Like if the gray suit doesn't feel authentic, if not me, not, being emotional when I feel emotional is not authentic, that is when we start to really feel that internal struggle and battle. And, people have to take responsibility for their own beliefs. But the way that we do that is one person at a time. Right. And so, and when people are open to even, coming to a presentation like this, understanding, like maybe my beliefs are something I need to look at. Maybe they are something I need to challenge, because, it's not everything around us. That is definitely a part of it, which hopefully if I get to telling a story, we can't negate that and write that off. But what we take in and how we take that information in can really impact us. And that will hold us back way more than whatever external factors there are. Right. So thank you everyone for sharing. I love discussion. I don't like just presenting. Okay. So limiting beliefs are often rooted in fear and negative thinking patterns. And there's no blame to be put on that, because we're not aware of it. But now as we become aware of it, now we can start to challenge it. So it limits us from our potential and affects the way that we see ourselves. It affects our expectations and our cause and effect perception. So if this happens, then Y will happen. Okay. And so if we create those type of relationships, we're jumping all the stuff in the middle and we're just like, oh, well, if this happens, then this will happen. And so I'm not even going to try. Right. And the danger in this is that our beliefs influence our perception, which then dictates our behaviors. So we don't just do things. Like a lot of times, sometimes people are like, they think that their behavior, even if they think it through, they thought it through, but then for other people, they think maybe this was impulsive. Neither one is the case. It really stems from our beliefs and our subconscious and what we believe should have happened, or what we expected to happen, or we wanted a certain result. And so because of that, it dictates how we behave. Okay. So where and when do beliefs develop? Typically, they're shaped in childhood, from our family, within our culture, within certain systems. So systems can be family sometimes, but it can also be industries, right? It could be workplace, and they're refined over time. Okay, so in the beginning, I shared a little bit about my story about growing up biracial, but having a white mother in Baltimore, right? And so having, not having friends, being bullied, and all of those things, even though no one flat out said certain things, there were certain beliefs that I took from that. So feeling like I'm not Black enough, right, to have Black friends. But then not that in Baltimore there was a lot of white friends, or white people for that matter, but when I went to and moved to a more diverse area, it felt like, well, where do I fit in all of this? And so having this feeling of I don't fit in for a long time. Okay. And so then the question is, okay, if this is a belief, then how is that impacting my behaviors? If I have the thought I don't fit in, or I'm not Black enough, then either I won't try to create relationships, right? Or if I do try, I might look at a certain group of people and that might feel more comfortable, right? It might feel less scary. Does that make sense? So beliefs become part of our subconscious mind. So when we act and when we react, it is from the subconscious or unconscious part of us. So we very rarely actually logically think about what to do. And even if we do logically think, a lot of times these beliefs are at the root of it. And so what we're logically thinking, or we're like, oh, well, I don't want to operate off of emotion. Oftentimes we still are, because these beliefs do drive emotions, right? Like if there's a fear of being rejected or not accepted, even though I can logically say, well, I should still go talk to people, I should try to make friends, that fear will still drive the belief or still the thoughts to come up to say, but oftentimes people don't accept you or whatever. Okay. Situations arise over time in your life that trigger these beliefs and reinforce them. So something starts in childhood, something starts with family, your culture, or systems, but then every time it happens, every time something triggers that belief from childhood, it reinforces it even into adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely.
So although we can logically say, well, I was a kid, that was such a long time ago, if it's not something that we've processed and worked through, it is still a trigger, and it's triggered every single time something comes up. Two people can witness or experience the same thing, but walk away with two different accounts and beliefs. So oftentimes we'll see this with siblings, right? Two people grew up in the same house. One person will, mom was this way, and the other person's like, well, what? Mom is not like that. Mom is like this, right? Like it's two different experiences. We've seen it happen with twins. We've seen it happen with siblings. It could be two people at an actual, in an environment where something happened. And one, for example, will have one sibling that goes down the quote unquote wrong path, right? They maybe get into drugs or something like that, and it's like, well, what happened? I don't understand. The other sibling, they went on to do great things and to be the success story. But it's not about what happened. It's about their experience, their perceived experience, and the beliefs and the meanings that they assign to that situation. Okay. So it's actually less about the situation and more about the belief and perceptions that arise from it. Right? I don't know if we'll have time for this. It's a 4-minute video. We will skip the video if for some reason we have time at the end. We can come back to it. But essentially, it is a video that shows a little boy. He's training with his father for football. And, his father is speaking affirmations to him. He's telling him he's strong. He's telling him all these things. He's practicing before his actual practice with other kids. He feels like, I'm a great football player. I'm going to make it. I'm going to be a success story. He gets to college and realizes, wow, everybody else is good too. All my life, I thought that I was the best. And right now I don't feel the best because everyone else is good. And so he starts to doubt himself and look at, his own, well, what happened? Like, why, and he's doubting everything. And so he gives up. And that is just like a segment of this one episode of a show. But what ends up happening in the show is they kind of flash back with the relationship with the father. And although in that moment we see dad, speaking affirmations and, making him feel like a strong person, there was also other points where it wasn't the same. He didn't feel like that. He didn't feel heard. He didn't feel validated. He didn't feel like I can do anything. And so therefore that starts to manifest when he's in a situation that challenges one value or one belief. His identity as I'm the greatest football player feels challenged. So talking about identity. And we start to uncover different beliefs that might have been held. Okay. Okay, so why are beliefs important to identify and analyze, right? So we're like, hey, I've gotten this far in my life. Why do I have to do this now? Okay. The reason is because through beliefs, we develop shoulds, oughtas, and you betters, also known as expectations. I should do this. You ought to do that, right? And so We have these subconscious beliefs about ourselves, others in the world that restrict our perspectives and our opportunities. They're holding us back from things like impacting real change, following our heart, doing what we want to do, and impacts our problem solving, us in our careers, us in our relationships, and really our relationship to ourselves. Limiting beliefs will stay unconscious if you do not take the time to identify them. Again, we operate from beliefs on a day-to-day basis. We don't think about them. That's what makes them unconscious. So we want to start identifying them. As a therapist, we do that with therapy, then also in coaching, identifying where these beliefs are coming up today. We can take them back and say, hey, where did this first come from? But we don't have to do that. We can just identify what is happening today. Where did we get this from? And what can we do to now challenge that, shift that, and start moving forward? Because they continue to make choices for us. Remember, beliefs will drive our behaviors. So if we want to have more control over what is happening and be able to move in a direction that feels good for us and aligned for us and what we want, we have to start challenging and looking at what are these beliefs that are making our choices. We cannot challenge or change something that we are not aware of. Okay. So earlier, Barbara and Sohila, is that how you pronounce it?
Sohela.
Sohela, kind of started bringing up, things that talking about in corporate, right? And so think about the example. So what happens when we hear statistics like Black and Hispanic college educated men make 80 cents and same Black and Hispanic college educated women make 70 cents to the dollar compared to their college educated white counterpart? What do we think happens to those Black and Hispanic college educated men and women?
I think I know what happened to the women. They never believed that they were good enough. That fear of rejection, and just by our very own nature, having to always assume guilt and responsibility, and it comes across as opposed to being arrogant and maybe assertive, maybe not arrogant, but it's kept us back to not believe that we could do the same job and same good job as a man. My mother, God bless her soul, she was an executive woman. She had gone through the glass ceiling. She had made every challenge. And when I would tell her about my experience in court, with the opposing counsel being arrogant, she would say, it's probably something different to be a male attorney. Like, it would kill my whole sense of self-confidence, but she didn't really mean it that way. She was just brought up within a culture that made her believe that. And as much as she challenged it and fought it, she was still trying to inject that into my system of beliefs.
Yes, right. And so understand, and that can give us a little bit of empathy and compassion for previous generations, for sure, right? In that, yes, things are better, right, from a certain place. And so they can recognize and they'll tell us like, oh, if I, back in my day, right? But things aren't perfect still. And still validate my experience. And also things still need to be better, and recognizing that when you say those things, it actually reinforces the belief that, yeah, maybe I should just be happy with this, right? Also, as Sohela said, the feeling of Black and Hispanic college educated counterparts would be, well, I'm not worthy enough, right? I'm not good enough. I always have to be proving myself. I always have to work harder just to be, if I'm just off of the same resume, right? They've done research looking at the same resume, but the name seems to insinuate different, cultural background, that just off of that, I'm making less. Well, there's must be something to it. And so that's a systemic belief or societal belief or that has been imposed, but that still starts to create a belief for me, right? So as a should, ought, and you better, You better work really hard to prove that you should earn that amount. Why do I have to work harder if someone else who's making more than me doesn't have to work as hard as I'm working? Right? So it's still, even though these are societal or systemic issues, they are still impacting my beliefs about myself and about others. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, and it makes things harder for everybody. All these polarizations and barriers and limitations.
And so the as challenging as it is still it's the beginning to be able to start identifying how are those things, how are these systemic barriers impacting what I believe and how I show up, right? And especially when we start to think about, you know, all these people that, whether we talk about like civil rights, that's what's coming to mind right now, but just any area where people went against the grain, right? There had to be a certain belief that, you know, we can make a change. If they had the belief of, well, I guess I am less than, or they have the belief of, well, nothing will change, we can't make a change, it's been going on for this long. If they have those beliefs, then it would impede, right, their behaviors. It would impede them from trying to even impact a change or make progress. And so that's where our beliefs about that, if we just start with our beliefs about ourselves and our beliefs about the world, how things will begin to change just off of that. And really just focusing, because it will feel like an uphill battle all the time if we try to change the beliefs out and external, if we haven't even started here, right? And so it's always starting and focusing here. And just by, I mean, if we talk about even from a spirituality standpoint, right? Like you can feel confidence, you can feel love, you can feel these things that aren't tangible, right? And so if people can feel that my beliefs are, no, I am worthy, I am good enough, you know, and all of these things, it will impact change. It will cause ripples, right? So what are common impacts of limiting beliefs? So what we tend to see are things like procrastination. People think like, oh, I just wait till last minute, you know, I do better under pressure. Like that is something that I hear all the time. And the reality is, no, there's automatic thoughts that are coming up, but also maybe you have the belief that you perform better with pressure. I have to be expected to do something in order for me to do it. So again, sometimes these there are behaviors, or there are things and ways that we operate that we just think are just kind of like haphazard. They just kind of, this is just how I am, but we are not how we are without beliefs. Okay, we talked about conforming already, right? So conforming, wanting to fit in, feeling like, well, maybe I should do this, right? And so when we're talking about lawyers, right, or even women in a lot of these either previously male dominated or tend to be very logical, analytical type of industries, we do see people feel like, well, I can't show emotion. I can't show that I'm bothered. I can't show that I feel discriminated against. I can't feel, you know, show that I feel the pressure of the workload. I can't, you know, speak up if, you know, I'm having things go on in my personal life that's affecting work. But are those not all real things, right? Those are all real experiences that people have. And yet there's this feeling that we can't, we for whatever reason, whether it's because of how our parents, what things that our parents told us or showed us, or society. Okay, there's comparison, right? So looking at what I'm doing versus what someone else is doing, limiting beliefs. Perfectionism. So this is a really, really big one. I work with a lot of high achieving, high performing corporate people. I told you I've done workshops at Apple. And so this concept of like, I need to be perfect. And so what we find, and some of that also can depend on culture, So there are certain and families, and so certain families, certain cultures. One of the things that we talked about during one of the workshops is this concept in some African cultures or families, or some Asian cultures and families, of this idea of perfection, and like I need to get this type of job, I need to be in this type of industry, I need to make this amount of money. No one ever might not have said all those things, but still this feeling that I need to do that. And what ends up happening is feeling like everything needs to be perfect, and if something goes wrong, even though we know things go wrong in life, right, the weight is so much heavier for some people, right? So those are because of beliefs and our limiting beliefs. Overworking, whether we're overworking ourselves or we expect others to overwork, this concept of, you should be the first one in or the last one out, or you should take on extra projects, or, you should do just more. Sometimes we see that in wives and mothers, right? This overworking in the house. So although their partner works and they work, they tend to take more of the household responsibilities. Those types of things are based on limiting beliefs, right? I grew up with, my mother was a stay-at-home mother for a good portion of my life before then going to work. But even when she went to work, I saw her cleaning, right? I saw her cooking. I saw her packing up, lunches and doing all the things. And so what happened when I became a mother, even though I worked and my husband worked, I was taking on more of that and building up resentment, not recognizing my husband never had an issue with doing any of the things, and today we're more 50-50, but it's recognizing there was no expectation from my husband. That was an expectation I placed on myself based on what I saw and what I perceived. Does that make sense? So again, sometimes beliefs are not outwardly said. No one ever said these are the things that you have to do, but societally we've seen what women have done, and this has been a big conversation piece with women being in the workforce and wanting to have careers, but then also wanting to have families and child rearing and all those things. But also we're seeing women's burnout at a increase to a dramatic rate, because we all have the same amount of hours, so how do we get all of the things done? Okay. Overthinking can be a limiting belief, right? So trying to think your way out of all the things, or if this happens, then this happens, and oh my god, right? Still overthinking. Imposter syndrome, this is something huge. It's like a main topic that I talk about when I do corporate workshops. Because again, if we're thinking about the example with the Black and Hispanic men and women who make less money, right? If they're in the same roles, there's this feeling of like, well, I've heard these statistics my whole life. So even though I'm in the role and even though I make as much money as my counterpart, there's a part of me that feels like I'm not supposed to be here. Someone's going to find out I'm a fraud, right? They're going to figure it out, or I don't feel good enough myself, right? Those are limiting beliefs. Feelings of pressure and high expectations, sadness, negative perspective, and a scarcity mindset. Okay, so all the things that we can feel at one point or another comes from our beliefs, again, whether it be from our family or society, that can create these impacts. Any questions? Anything to add? Anything that stands out?
Yeah, I'd like to make some comments about just nature having distinguished between male and female by endowing women with some attributes that are unchangeable. So I know that it is a belief system, but it's not one that I want to change because of the fact that women are more cautious about risk taking. Their nature of taking precautionary measures only because they anticipate. It's not fear, but it's anticipation of consequences that sets us apart. That intuition that sets us apart from men makes us be perceived as weak, as uncertain, as not having the last word, black and white, attitude. so a lot of these, I'm honored to be endowed with those, and I will carry them through my life. But I've been told where my male counterparts would need a yes or no, but the explanation and trying to elicit a consensus or a consultative approach fails with them, because the other person is not giving them yes or no. And with clients the same way, some they don't want to know the consequences and different ways of explaining things to them because they don't want to take ownership of their decision-making process, and they want someone else to do that for them. And if a male attorney will say, we're going to do this, we're going to win, and then they go and they lose, and they say, well, we didn't know, versus a female attorney explaining, if we did this, we might lose, if we did that, we might win. They don't like that. So it's the culture that the society is imposing on us. It's not my imagination or my belief system that I can change or want to change. And that's where I'm having this issue. And I want you to tell me if your research or your studies, allow for that, because I don't think I want to change some of my endowed attributes that sets me apart from my counterparts.
No, so that's 100% fair, right? And when we talk about, again, so I mentioned in the beginning, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, none of them are bad until we make them bad, right? So they're not negative unless we are getting a negative impact from it, but also if it doesn't align with us. For example, the reason why I always state and also joke that I'm from the East Coast is because I have a more direct approach, very direct. Some might call it brutally honest, right? And for a long time, although that is how I am, and I do believe that there is something positive about it, I believed that it was a negative thing. Right. It impacted relationships, or, I hurt people's feelings. I'm aggressive. And it's not to say that I needed to change that piece, but that didn't mean that I couldn't at least, At least consider, I couldn't at least consider the ways of impacting. Right. So recognizing that maybe I can change the way that I say certain things. It doesn't mean that I'm not direct, but maybe I need to at least consider before I speak, or maybe I need to start off with something specific, point out the good before I start with the criticisms or something like that. Right. And so recognizing it doesn't mean you have to change inherently as a person, especially if that's not something, if you are feeling like it's benefiting you. This matters when there's something for you that's not a benefit. There's something that is challenging. There's something that you are experiencing on a day-to-day that is causing suffering in some way. And so that is when we want to start analyzing our beliefs. All of us do have beliefs, though, that are either contributing to our suffering or hindering us in some way. And so those are the ones that we want to look at.
I think for me, the one that really stands out is the overworking. Thinking that if something needs to be done, I should do it. And then it gets to the the point where people are expecting me. Yeah, and Diane will do it. And it's So I have learned to say no.
Good.
and it's taken me a long time.
And it is also a vicious circle, as you mentioned, right? Like this feeling of like, I need to do, if there's something to be done, I should be the one. I should step up, I should do it. I want it done well, I'll be the one. And then what happens is then other people may start to have that expectation, or we feel that people have that expectation because that's what we've done for so long. Right. And now we feel like, well, I would be letting them down because, right. And so it's this vicious circle where it feels very challenging to get out of that cycle of belief.
Yes.
But
I am taking baby steps, and I am, yes.
Good. Right. Yes. And so that is one of the things when I do my one-on-one coaching, because typically people fit in one of 4 buckets that I found. And one of those is the overworking or the overfunctioner. And one of the things that we have to work on is delegating, but we have to break that belief system in order to delegate, right? Like if you feel like you're the only one who can do it, or you feel like you're the strong one, and so you should brunt all, all the labor. Well, you got to break that before we start trying to. So when we talk about that pyramid, right? We have to look at identity and beliefs before we can start doing the behavior of delegation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm gonna have to think. I don't think I'm the only one that can do it. I guess I look at it as that this needs to be done, and no one else is stepping up. And yeah, but yeah, I probably need to think about that a little bit more.
And some people, won't feel like, some people, there are the people from maybe working with some perfectionism as a secondary attribute with the overworking, where I want it done well, no one else can do it well like me, right? And then there are other people who are just simply the overfunctioners or the overworkers that are like, well, I'll be the volunteer, or I'll do the thing, or I'll, because I know I can, I'm the strong one, right? And so they take it all on.
Yeah.
So Encanto is like the best movie. I have a 5-year-old, so Encanto is like the best movie because it starts to show that, and it starts to show what beliefs and identity and how that impacts people's behaviors, right? So
yeah,
you're never seen Encanto, watch Encanto.
Well, and I think that feeling of the I'm the one that's responsible probably came from my childhood, because I grew up in both parents were alcoholics, but they were functioning alcoholics, and there was always this feeling of just possibly having to be responsible, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. So
yeah, right. So this identity of I'm the responsible one, or I shoulder the responsibility, and this belief system then dictate the behaviors. And so that again, something from childhood we start to see operate, even though we're not in that situation,
right?
There are things that feel like that or trigger that feeling. And so then we continue to operate and from our identity of I am the responsible one. I have to do it just in case someone else can, or whatever.
Yeah, but if you are that overworking person and you've been that way for years, it's not only is it hard to break those habits, but you have to do it fighting not only against yourself, but against all of the other people that you have trained to believe that you will do it. You will do everything. And so it makes it doubly hard. And I've been in the same situation that Diane is in right now. I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. And it's not easy. And I'm in the stage now of making another change in my beliefs about what I have to do and what other people can expect of me. And it's not easy. It's not easy. But
it isn't easy.
No.
Edie's another one. And so is Sohaila.
Something you can count on, though. If you don't deal with it, your body will deal with it.
Yes. Yes.
So it'd be nice to live the rest of your life with some peace and confidence and being who you are. And earlier when you were talking, I thought about every so often when you hear the words of your mother coming out of your mouth.
Yes.
I would never do that. There's other things that happen like that I've been, mentally questioning myself, like, is that really me? Is that really me?
I love that.
Note of that and knock it off.
I love that. So I often tell clients some of these beliefs we hear in the form of thoughts, but really it is our parents' voice. And so just like you said, being able to recognize, like, is that me? And by is that me, is that how I truly feel, or is that how I want to feel? Because even if you feel that way, it doesn't mean you want to feel that way. And again, that's where struggle starts to manifest, right? And so that's a part of my story I didn't share, which was after I had quit my job and started my own business and found myself struggling. I was struggling with things like mom guilt, even though I was in the house all the time. It was now not good enough because why am I not the patient mom who can also run a business and clean the house and cook and potty train a 2-year-old? And so being able to recognize, like, okay, at some point it's got to stop being everyone else and everything else, and recognize that there's something deeper here because the environments have changed, right? And also at that time, I started having chronic health conditions pop up, and was confused, didn't know what was happening, and ended up getting diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and realizing, one, through research, not to say that every disease is purely because of stress, but having to also take responsibility and recognize that stress is a huge contributor to a lot of the things that we experience. And so whether a doctor can say this is why it started or not, or, this is connected to this or not, recognizing that a lot of our physical symptoms, a lot of times are attributed to either mental struggle or stress. And again, this is one of the reasons why I do this work, because I'm still pretty young. I'm thankful that I have the background that I have, because I'm able to take responsibility. Like of course, when I first got the diagnosis, it was like, shocking. But at the same time, it was also like, okay, now what are you going to do about it? Are you going to continue to live life the way that you've been living life? And so being able to see and look at how I've contributed to my own stress and my own thoughts about things and my own, just mental and physical health struggles that I have, had over my life, and being able to take responsibility for that. And you're not going to be able to eliminate everything, but taking responsibility and taking control of what you can control, a phrase that I say to all my clients is control the controllable, can make a huge difference. And so recognizing, like, I'm not okay with, yes, it served me, me working hard served me, my stress served me, but it doesn't serve me anymore.
Yeah.
Jessica, I'm sorry, I'm gonna
No, that's okay, Sahela.
try and eliminate one of your limiting beliefs. If you were under the impression that you have to leave enough time for questions and answers, and you're limiting your presentation, you want to be within the time, let me just give you liberation from that, because your beautiful, engaging, interactive session allowed for the questions and answers, and because of the number of individuals that are participating allows this kind of conversation. I want to ask you to please finish and complete your presentation, even if you wanted to show that video. I think I'm speaking on behalf of everyone that we're able to give you all the way till 6:30 because some of the questions and answers are answered. But if you're done, then I would open the question and answer session. Just wanted to get an idea of how we're going to move towards the end of the program.
Sure. So I have 2 more things and then we're done. So, and they're pretty quick, but that gets into, so one of the things that I was just mentioning was the 100% responsibility, and being able to take that responsibility and that control. And that's what we'll get into now. Here we go. So E plus R equals O. This is the principle of taking 100% responsibility. So this is realizing that there's an event and there's our response, and it creates the outcome. And I do understand that this can seem very oversimplified. However, if we can rid ourselves of the limiting belief that, we can't control the outcome, No, but we can control the response, our response to it. And so you can't change the event. An event happens. Okay. The example of my health. Okay. I got a diagnosis. That is what it is. But I can change my response to it. So how I chose to respond to it is to recognize the part I was playing in my stress, recognize like I can't just continue, eating and drinking the things that I want to eat or drink because they are triggers for me. And I have to make sure that I move my body and that I take care of myself. So engage in self-care activities and movement, right? So that's a response. Your outcome changes because your responses change. And what you want to do is continue to change your responses until you get the outcome that you're looking for, or at least closer to the outcome that you're looking for. Okay. So you keep adapting your responses until you get that outcome. This requires you to live, not just know, but live the principle 100% responsibility. And I will have to say that when I first heard this, I was at a event. It was a 3-day event with Jack Canfield, which is the author of Chicken Soup for All the Souls books. And his event was amazing. He was amazing. He was talking about this. And there was still something in me at that time that was just like, that's really hard for me because, as a Black woman, there are certain things that, you have to look at, right? Like you have to look at, we talk about like racism is real, discrimination is real. Like all of these things are real. And it was hard for me hearing this from, but a white man telling me these things because I'm like, you don't understand. But that was also the beginning of my beliefs work. All of those things can be true while still looking at my response. Because there are many factors that contribute to the outcome, but if it was just that, no one would ever succeed. For every reason why something is not possible, there are hundreds of other people who have faced the same circumstances and succeeded. And so that is what I try to remember anytime some of those limiting beliefs pop up as to why things were more challenging, would be more challenging or feel that they're more challenging or whatever the case is, but recognizing, but there is someone else that is doing that. And we can give all the reasons as to why it's working for them or why things are that way for them, but not for me. But what is the point of giving that energy to that when I could instead give the energy of, great, so that's proof that it can happen.
Awesome.
So that means that you are 100% responsible for your responses. And again, your responses are your thoughts, your actions, and your behaviors. And the last thing, so what can you do to change your beliefs? Remember and embody this principle of E plus R equals O. Take 100% responsibility. Shift from a fixed mindset, so thinking that this is just how things are, to a growth mindset. Drop out the ain't it awful club, thinking about all the negatives, ain't this awful that it happened to me. Create a focused action plan to becoming the person that you want to be. Reframe and challenge your thoughts and embrace a new identity. So now that we've gone through this presentation, you have officially began your journey. And with these tools, there's unlimited potential to really start to analyze and look at what do we feel is truth versus what is the truth, and recognizing that our mindset plays the biggest factor in all of it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was, what a wonderful presentation, Jessica. We love it. We're still gonna open it to questions and answers, because some of us who were not with us from the very beginning, I truly recommend that we visit the website and then catch your first part of the presentation, because I think it really gives a great foundation into the rest of the conversation. So, well, with that, we want to know how did this presentation affect you? How did it help you want to do something about your life? How does it apply to your life? And how are you going to try and find some applications by using some of the recommendations?
You know, I mentioned a little while ago that I'm in another transition period of life, and I can see that taking the time to sit down and think about my thinking would be beneficial. There are things that I want to accomplish in this new. I recently moved into an assisted living facility. So I no longer have a home, I no longer have a car, I no longer have independence, you know, and it's a huge thing. All in all, I'm doing very well, but there are still things that need to be taken care of.
And she's got a gorgeous walk-in closet.
Yes, that one of the big perks of this stage of life is that I have a walk-in closet. But anyway, but I can see that it would serve me to just sit down and think, okay, I know what I want to do. Maybe I need to write down some steps and write down some things and think about what is necessary to accomplish stasis in this next excuse me, next stage of my life. So yeah, I appreciate your comments, and you know, the early stages, the things you talked about in your childhood, that was mine. Lived it. And you are right. Those scars stay.
Mhm.
They stay. Some of the things happened 80 years ago,
Mhm.
and they're still there.
Yep.
So I've learned to kind of, you know, roll over it, but they're there.
Thank you, Barbara. I see some hands, and thank you. I appreciate you raising your hand so we can take turns. Al has a question or a comment. Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Jessica, and everybody else. That I wish I would have attended from the beginning, but unfortunately I was at work and I just joined maybe the last half an hour. But I would definitely listen to Suhaila's recommendation. I will go and watch the whole program. But I just had two comments, and you know, one thing is I wish this educations were for both men and women, because the more we know, the more men know about women, the better we'll probably not adjust, but understand women and be able to accept some of the things that one or two things as a male perspective that I notice in women, and you group of women are a bunch of very successful and very accomplished women. So I don't put you on you're probably on one percentile. But then in general, I noticed that women that I've noticed in my experience, they analyze and reanalyze things so much that they lose touch of the reality of what the problem was. So one of the things that, for example, probably male is better in that is that we don't analyze much. It's either black or white, sometimes some shades of gray. But that's something that, you know, I think I was going to see what is your opinion about that. And is it something that is something that could help if you know, we reduce the amount of analyzing, reanalyzing. As far as the second thing was, I love your formula E plus R is equal to O, but I would add a parenthesis for another E for environment. You know, and that's something that, you know, the event and responses are definitely impacted by the environment you're in. So if you consider environment, so there's not always one response for one event. Depends on where you are, who you're talking to, what age you are, what culture you are talking about, and all that. So that's it. Thank you so much. It was very nice. I will definitely go and listen to the whole program.
Thank you for your comments. There was something, the first part that you said, I might have to re-ask a part, but which was something that Sohaila had brought up earlier, right? Which is this concept of like men and women kind of taking different approaches or thinking about things differently. The way that, so, and first and foremost, you had mentioned this over analyzing. And so one of the common impacts of limiting beliefs that I have here is overthinking, right? And so having to understand that there is a reason why, you know, there might be some overthinking. Now, overthinking in the aspect that I'm talking is more of the negative, like ruminating, you know, it's creating a stress or a problem. When Sohaila was talking about it, I think she was more talking about just being analytical. Is that correct, Sohaila?
Right.
Yeah. So yes, there can be some differences, but I think sometimes we also make these overgeneralizations that like men think like this and women think like this. And I'm guilty of it too. I will say this, like, you know, I'll talk about my husband. I'm like, why are men like that? Right. But the reality is we do know men that are overthinkers, and we do know men that will analyze and that will break down things and, you know, whatever. And a lot of times they are patted on the back for that type of thing. And then we have women who might be like that. And again, maybe depending on the environment or the setting, they're not necessarily appreciated for that way of thinking. However, when we're talking about limiting beliefs, part of this overthinkingness or over analyzing could be based on some of the ways that women have been reinforced. So, you know, this feeling like we have to be perfect, we have to make the right answer. And so this feeling like I need to think and keep thinking and analyzing so that I make sure that I choose or do the right thing. Whereas sometimes, I'm not saying this is all men, but there can be this feeling like, well, it'll be okay if I make a mistake because I'll still be accepted anyway. Right. So again, these limiting beliefs, and the reason why I said some men, not all, again, because we do have to consider things like culture and things. So we can't just look at men and women. There are certain like religion, culture, race, like all of those things, families that still impact those areas. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, yes. But there are books written about men being from Mars and women from Venus. So there are different ways. Men generally think linear, where women's thinking is circular. And again, we're learning that it's not a negative thing in either context, because the two complement each other, and the process of consultation and all of that will bring it into a complete whole. And that's why the 50% of the population needs to have a voice and need to have a place. As to Al's comment about men and education, there is such a great movement by shifting the question as to what women should do to just get this equality, you know, on the surface, you know, make it work. But also, what about men? What are the roles of men? Actually, 3 or 4 sessions ago, we had that question and addressed it right in the face. And we had videos that we watched and showed how many men are taking on roles to do what they think they have fallen behind in doing to bring that equality to the surface. So with Al's comment, I think if every one of us feels that these invitations are not for women only, these invitations come to us, we should post it on our Facebook, we should go to social media, ask our friends, male and female, to participate, to come in and see what is the big elephant in the room, or what is something that we just haven't talked about all these years. So yeah, what do you say about that?
What I've also found, because when I do these for companies, typically it is a mixed room, right? Most of the work that I've done has also been within the diversity inclusion space. So what that also does, again, is this, it brings this commonality, right? Of recognizing like your limiting beliefs might not be my limiting beliefs, but because we share the common impacts of limiting beliefs, I can empathize. I think that always empathy, compassion, right, is always going to be the jump start to understanding where to even begin with change. And so when I do these corporate workshops, being able to facilitate conversations and discussions like these, whether, we're talking about Black, white, we had one leader of the working parents group, we have LGBTQ, we have, right, but all of us being able to have this conversation and recognize we might all have different walks of life, but recognizing that we all have beliefs and we all have limiting beliefs. And because of that, we can recognize the societal implications or barriers or, obstacles, and figure out how we can all become allies in this change. But I think at the base of it all, it always comes down to just first and foremost, understanding.
Thank you. Thank you. Diane has her hand up, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when we chatted, Jessica, did I mention that on the third Saturday of every month, we have a dialogue called Toward Oneness? Did we talk about?
No, I don't believe so.
Oh, okay.
But I've heard of Toward Oneness.
Yeah, because it comes, Healthy RC sends out our flyers for the women's empowerment, and
Did they just send something?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I was like, I think I just saw that.
Yeah, and if you can, it would be great if you could join us tomorrow morning. It's from 10 to 11:30. What Edie's granddaughter is raising two children, two bicultural children. And she raised the question, what do I need to do to make sure that they have a fully rounded, cultural background? So this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow at our Toward Oneness. So if you could join us and, pop in the, put your comments in the conversation, that would be wonderful.
Okay, I'll try my best.
Yeah, I know. This is last minute. I know.
It's all right.
But I will put you on the list because we do this and we talk about all of the things that are barriers between us becoming a human family. And I think what you were talking about is also having this realization we're members of a human family. And we need to sit down and have these conversations about all of the things that you were talking about, and see each other as members of a human family. Because when we do that, then we can see each other's humanity. And that is what we need to do today. That's what needs to be done today. And there's different ways to get to it, but I'm sorry, go ahead. So
I'm going to raise my hand and pick up on another point that Diane brought up, and it was the spirituality. And I think your presentation was magnificent, was superb. The only piece that I think was missing for me was the help of my faith and my belief system that is an overarching belief system that allows me to overcome some of those limiting barriers. Because reaching the point that Diane, that after all, I'm at this level in the eyes of the Creator, and that every one of these members of the family of humanity are part of me, and we're part of the collective force, and nothing could be disempowering me, even if it is a limiting belief. So I think if that piece is added, this is just an overall wholesome treatment approach to your patients. And so if I may be bold enough to just suggest that piece could also empower individuals.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
When I do one-on-one coaching with clients, typically we do bring in, because this wasn't part of this presentation, but in my mindset presentation, there's a wheel of life. And so one of the slices of that is spirituality, whatever that means for each person, right? And so obviously speaking to a group, it's a little more challenging to discuss because everyone has their own different beliefs. But in a one-on-one setting, for them to also be able to recognize, the beliefs that they have from their faith or spirituality that are helpful, but then also being able to recognize sometimes when there's things that if there's a belief that they have, whether it be from family or childhood or something they perceived, but then also if it challenges something for their faith, how that can also create some, some things for people. And so again, it is easier in a one-on-one setting, but 100% that spirituality and faith and those do impact beliefs. And so recognizing that and being able to look at what the impact is and how that comes into play.